Welcome to the What to Expect While Fostering and Adopting podcast show. If you're a foster mom, on the journey to adoption, already adopted, or somewhere in the middle, trying to figure out how to navigate the foster care system, wanting to grow your family through adoption, trying to balance everything, or stuck in that space of all things unknown, you're in the right place. What if there was a way to fast track your knowledge, prepare you for the good and the hard, and somebody who could answer that long list of questions I know you have? Hi friend, I'm Christine Marie, biblical mindset coach, adoptive mom, and previous foster parent of 77 children. Yep, you heard that right, 77 kiddos. I'm your host, and my goal is to help make your journey a lot easier by sharing my best tools, techniques, and skills that helped me pivot from foster care to adoption, fully surrender, and trust the process. I'm about to bring some calm to the chaos and show you how to navigate through this journey with a whole lot of grace. So go grab your cup of coffee and let's jump in. Hello. I'm super excited. Today is a really special episode. I am so excited to introduce you to somebody who is very well known in the foster adoptive community. And he has a long list of things that he has done to not only support foster care, but adoption, but also human trafficking. So many different hats that this incredible individual wears. Dr. John DeGarmo, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited that you're here today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so if you would love, you have so many resources. So I would and trainings, and I was looking through this morning, the list of the trainings that you offer for foster parents, and it's amazing, even down to like head lice. You cover it all. And then additionally, I know that you do a lot of work with legislation, and you've been a TEDx speaker. You've just done so many things. So I would just love for you to introduce yourself to the audience. We are listened to in over 60 countries, so many different, foster families, adoptive families that I would just love for them to get to know you. So if you could just start from what even led you to this path.
Well, sure. Thanks for asking. I'm Dr. John DeGarmo, founder and director of the Foster Care Institute, and I never planned on being a foster adoptive parent. It was nothing I set out to do. In fact, if you would have asked me 30 years ago, I would have said, no way, because I really believe the myths and misconceptions that are associated with foster care, the kids are bad kids and foster parents are weird people. That last one's a little bit true. You gotta be a little bit weird to do what you do. It's not a normal lifestyle. And I think probably the path that set me off initially on this journey was the death of our first child. Our first child died of a condition, some call it anencephaly, some call it anencephaly. It's a condition where the brain or skull doesn't truly form. And my wife was in labor for 92 hours.
Wow.
That's when we were living in Australia, where she's from. I write in my book, Faith in Foster Care, that I was really, I turned my back on a lot of things in my life at that point, including my faith. And then it wasn't until years later when we moved back to the United States, and we had 3 elderly children, and I was teaching in a very rural high school in a very rural part of Georgia. A lot of generational apathy, a lot of generational poverty. And I noticed a lot of kids in my classroom had issues with behavior and attendance and academics, and I kept thinking, what's going on? And then I met a lot of their birth parents, and I recognized, it starts in the home. And at that time, not only did I have a pregnant senior in my classroom with triplets, and I recognized that neither her nor the father of the kids was in any shape to raise these kids, I also had a lot of victims in my classroom who were, at that time, in the late 90s, at the time they were victims of the largest child sex trafficking ring in America. At the time was led by a guy who called himself Dr. Malachi York in middle Georgia. He had this Nuwaubian nation, if you will. But what he was doing was he's bringing over 1,000 children over. He was eventually arrested for bringing over 1,000 children over state lines to have sex with them. And a lot of these kids were in my classroom. So I went to my wife and said, we lost our first child. We have 3 healthy children. And I have all these kids in my classroom who need help. How can we help them? And that led to discussions of foster parenting, which eventually led to my doctorate centered around foster care, which eventually led to all that I do every single day. And I've had over 60 plus kids come through my home. We've adopted 3. We've had 4 failed adoptions, so we're familiar with that as well. We at one point actually had 11 kids in the house at the same time, and we had 7 in diapers at one point. which
Wow.
I think 7 in diapers, by the way, should be illegal in all 50 states because that was something else. And that's where I'm at today. I'm driven every day to make the system a better one, not just for the kids, not just for the foster parents, but for the birth parents and just for everybody, society in general.
Wow, that's awesome. So at one point, we had 11 kids in our home as well. So I understand that we fostered 77, adopted 2. And I agree with you. It was the case of the slowly boiled frog for us because we wanted to help. And yet, I think that's where they need stricter. It's hard. It's that balance between there's not enough homes, but yet overburdening the homes that are there with the bleeding hearts to help should never be allowed because it's just too much and the crisis is truly there. But what's the answer? I'm not sure.
Well, it was, challenging, but at the same time, it's been the most rewarding thing I've done. Every child that's come
Agreed.
to my home has made me a better person in some way. In
Yeah.
fact, if I'm looking right in front of me here, I've got pictures of so many kids that have come to live through our home because in our house, there's no labels, there's no biological or foster or adoptive. They're members of our family, and we come to love them as our own unconditionally.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's amazing. So talk to me a little bit about the mental health crisis that you're seeing right now in the foster care system.
Well, I think it's well beyond the foster care system.
Agreed.
I was telling a journalist this morning, and I'll be telling a legislator later on this afternoon that the real pandemic, as far as I'm concerned, and has been for several years now, it's not a virus, it's mental health for our children. Since the lockdowns of 2020 and 2021, we've seen teenage suicide attempts up 70%. We've seen teenage obesity up, childhood depression, anxiety, all these things are up. And society in general is struggling with that. But then when you throw them into the foster care system where they already have issues of trust, already have issues of attachment, they already may have issues of anger management or whatever it might be, and they're struggling with their own trauma from their abuse, their neglect, their abandonment. And then they throw in the mental health issues that are compounding right now our society. A lot of today's foster parents and caretakers are not really equipped to address these new challenges. And that may be one of the reasons why in 2020 and 2021 we lost a lot of good foster parents who said, I can't do this. Because there's no one there to help. There was no
Right.
caseworker there to help them out because of social distancing or whatever that was at that time. And today's caseworkers are overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, under-supported, understaffed, underpaid, so we're losing caseworkers as well. So it's a real challenge, and it's one that it's probably been the forefront of my work the last couple of years.
In a perfect world, if you
Mhm.
could fix everything, what do you think a starting point is? What would you say this is the solution?
In a perfect world, we would never have a need for foster care, because in a
Right.
perfect world, every child is gonna live in a loving, supporting, safe, stable home. Unfortunately, we're far from that. But as I mentioned, our caseworkers are overworked, overwhelmed. Foster parents are not getting enough support services. I would do a number of things to, if you will, fix the foster care system. To begin with, our foster parents have to have the support services they need as they're caring for these children in crisis. We did a study at the Foster Care Institute where we interviewed over 5,000 foster parents, and we asked them, what is the number one reason why you're quitting on average after 18 months? By far, the response was foster parents feel that they don't get the support services they need during times of burnout, stress, during times of feelings of grief and loss, during times of compassion fatigue. But yet, our caseworkers are so overwhelmed with so much right now on their plate, if you will, they're unable to address those concerns that foster parents have. So, we need to lower the ratio between foster parent and caseworkers so caseworkers have more time to devote to the foster parents. We need to make sure foster parents are getting the support services they need during those times of burnout, stress, compassion fatigue, which is my number one, by the way, my number one training across the country right now is compassion fatigue. We need to make sure that the children in foster care, as well as foster parents, get professional therapy and counseling because foster parenting can be a very, very challenging, emotionally challenging lifestyle. I don't call it a job, I call it a lifestyle.
Mhm.
A foster parent's heart's you know this, a foster parent's heart's a lot like a quilt with all these patches placed over it because when a child leaves their home, most likely there's gonna be feelings of grief and loss. It's like losing a member
Right.
of a family. And that's just one of the things we struggle with. So we foster parents and the kids need to get professional therapy and counseling services. When a child returns back to the home, they need to have support services wrapped around that biological family member for at least 6 months to a year in case a family should sink back into their own addictive behaviors or depression or struggling, whatever they might be struggling with, and the child does not come back into care or worse.
Right.
Those are just a few of the many ways that the system can be addressed. Again, we're far from a perfect world.
I love that you brought that up because that's something that I talk a lot about on my episodes is that the biggest thing I wish I would have had was counseling when I was a foster parent.
All right.
Because the truth is, most foster parents, I mean, you can't really air how you're feeling, your burdens, how stressed out you are, because if you talk to the caseworker about those things, you're going to be labeled.
Yes. And in addition, no one understands a foster parent like another foster parent. My
Right.
friends, my family members, those closest to me don't understand what it's like caring for a child in crisis 24 hours a day, the emotional attachments we make and all the challenges that we face. So if we were to talk about some of these issues, a lot of people are going to look at us a little bit odd. They already do. They already do because
Right.
we're doing something that's so unusual. Bringing a
Right.
child to your home has been abused. That's
Mhm.
very unusual. So they're going to look at us odd. They might judge us. They might criticize us. I've had people say, "Well, that's what you signed up for." It's not helping.
No.
So yeah, the lifestyle of foster parent is one that's tough. So that's why one of the things I'm doing in the state of Georgia is I'm helping to establish foster parent support groups because foster parents have to surround themselves with people who have walked in their shoes, who have been there, done that, so to speak, where they can cry, they can vent, they can laugh, they can learn, they can hug each other. Because again, no one else really understands what it's like for them. My own family doesn't get what we do or why
Yeah.
we do it, or the challenges we face every day. They just see so many people see a revolving number of kids coming in and out of a house for foster parents, but they don't see the attachments, the relationships that are made. They don't see the night terrors or the reactive attachment disorder. They don't see the sleeping anxieties, eating disorders. They don't see all those things. They don't see marriages might be struggling. Your birth children, your own biological children might be struggling. They don't see those things.
Well, and I think that's one of the biggest things is these foster children and then the birth families have these wraparound services, but those are not there for even the biological children in the home
Right.
or the foster families. They're just kind of left out there to hopefully figure it out. So that was one of the other pieces that I've always said, a lot of times, if you're a foster adoptive family parent, your biological children are going to say, "Yes, I support this. Yes, mom," because they want to agree with their parents that this is a good thing. But having that therapist that they can go to where they can say, "I'm really struggling. This is hard. I want my mom and dad to be happy with me, but I'm really struggling." Just another check-in point for your biological children because I feel like even for our biological children, there was such a pressure to these children are in need and they can see that these children are in need, but then they were having their own struggles. And as foster parents, the bandwidth that you have when you've had no sleep and you're struggling to sit down and say, "It's okay if you aren't happy, let's talk about it."
You mentioned no sleep. I think of foster parents. I often tell this when I'm speaking at events that foster parents go to work for one reason, and that's to rest. Because when they get home, it's full on. One of the things that my wife and I would do when we were actively fostering was when we would have the phone call. When the call would come for a
Yeah.
placement, we'd sit down with our children and give the children as much information as we were able to do so, and we'd ask our kids, are you ready? Are you up for this? And sometimes they may say to us, "Dad, we need a break." Okay, we'll have a break. Or sometimes they may say, "Dad, this is too hard." There have been times when my own kids have said, "Dad, this child is driving me crazy," and I would think to myself, "Well, he's driving me crazy too." Um, but at the same time, I really believe that my children, and perhaps yours as well, are are much better people for the
Yep.
experience because they have been able to and none of my kids may become foster parents, but I believe they're all going to lead a life of serving others in some way. In fact, I'm seeing that with my older kids. I have my younger ones because they have been able to very personally, up close, experience what it's like for a child who has experienced tremendous abuse, neglect, abandonment. They live with these kids. They form relationships. They become their brothers and sisters. So my children are very, very quick to stand up to against bullying. They're very quick to stand up to help somebody else, lend a hand, help in any way. And that to me has been a wonderful gift to watch, to see my children embrace that, if you will.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I remember being in a store with my daughter, a grocery store, and there was a child and he was screaming and he was maybe 10 or 12, throwing himself on the ground. And all these people around were looking at this parent, right? Like, what a bad parent. You could just see it. And my daughter said, Mom, I wonder if, what he's struggling with. I mean, they ask these curious questions, or I wonder if he's on the spectrum and he's overstimulated. I mean, they ask these questions without judgment because,
Right.
and I do agree with you about that because I feel like my kids will stand up to other kids against bullying. They have this understanding of what trauma in a home might look like from just hearing about these kiddos' stories. So there is an education that's happened for my kids, and it's wonderful.
Yes, to be sure, to be sure. I have story after story after story of my children doing something very similar to the story that you just shared there. And again, they may never be foster parents, but everyone I believe is going to serve others in some way and put others first in some way. Even my youngest does that, always putting people before herself.
That's awesome. So we talked about the mental health crisis. One thing that I saw as a foster parent was the over medication.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I remember one of the kiddos we had, I think he was on 13 medications a day.
Right.
And I had to take him every 30 days to see a psychiatrist because he was way over the limit of what foster children are allowed to be on. And what I noticed is a lot of the medications was on were antipsychotics, but we're almost just trying to subdue his behavior and not really getting to the root of it.
Right. Absolutely right. 100%.
Trying to manage the outbursts, to
Yep.
manage the liability that he could potentially cause.
Yes, completely agree. Children in foster care generally are over-medicated with psychotropic drugs as they go from one home to the next, and they go from one doctor to the next. They're prescribed one medication after one medication, one medication. My wife is a doctor of naturopathic medicine. It's all natural in our house.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we had no problem during 2020, 2021. We never got sick because she would look to natural remedies. And so we had a child like yours who was way over medicated. He was 17 years of age, and he was so medicated, I firmly believe it was to sedate him and keep him quiet in the corner as his mother bounced around from home to home to home with boyfriend to boyfriend to boyfriend. And when he came to live with us, my wife was able to whittle him down to one drug, just one, because she was giving him again these different alternatives, these natural alternatives. And it struck me. It was like watching a butterfly emerge from a cocoon. He had life. He had energy. He had motivation. He was inspired to do things. He saw a life of possibilities and opportunities that he never saw before. Some of those stories were very, very funny opportunities. But he grabbed life by the reins at that point. That old say, "Carpe diem," seize the day. He did when he got off all those drugs, and that was a really fascinating thing to watch. And that's the point where when I thought to myself, "Oh, my wife's onto something here. She's onto something here."
Yeah. No, it's just, and I think that's a piece that I recognized as a foster parent is you want to lower the likelihood of a dangerous situation happening. And I can see how that can be done by sedating these children, but it's terrible to see that because they don't really truly ever experience the healing when they're sedated.
Correct. Correct. And it affects every aspect of their life. Every aspect of their life. Is there a reason why kids in foster care are generally 18 months behind academically, struggle with reading and math skills? Well, that's part of the problem. Part of the problem. They have, is there a reason why 65% end up homeless, 75% end up incarcerated when they age out of the system? They have little social skills. They
Yeah.
have little hope or opportunity in their life. And much of that is due to these problems, right?
Well, and I think also the generational, it keeps happening and
Yes.
happening.
Yes.
And,
Right.
it's our daughter who we adopted, both of our kiddos have really hard attachment diagnoses. And one of the big things we did is I pulled them out of school and did homeschooling with them because I said, this will not continue. We will break the cycle. It ends with you, and they're both thriving and doing amazing. But that's the burden I think that us parents take on to break the cycle. And I think it's easier, honestly, just to keep them in school and have the break during the day. But can you talk a little bit more about reactive attachment disorder and how you're helping to kind of advocate in that area?
That's a struggle for everybody. Have
Yeah.
you had a child in your home with reactive attachment disorder?
Multiple.
So it's exhausting for everybody in the home. Everybody
Yes.
in the home is worn out by it. You touched on generational. 2 of the 3 I've adopted are third generation foster care. Their parents and grandparents were out in the system,
Yeah.
and their birth mother, I write in several of my books, experienced horrific abuse at age 9. Just horrific. It would make your skin shudder. But yes, reactive attachment disorder is we had a group of kids, 5 kids, 5 siblings. Their house had no running water, no heat, no air, no food, no plumbing. You couldn't see the house. The floor in the house was covered in human and dog feces. Mom was running a meth lab with 2 of her teenage boyfriends, not much older than the 13-year-old boy who was responsible for making sure his siblings were fed, clothed, and in school every day, and the family finances as well. When they came to our house, I write about in the book Love and Mayhem. When they came to our house, their clothes are stapled together, and we had to burn the clothing because it's contaminated with meth and feces. And the middle child had reactive attachment disorder, and when he would this is the second time we had 11 kids in the house, and when he would walk into the room, everybody would scatter. Everybody would scatter, his siblings, my own children, because no one wanted to be around it because you just didn't know what to expect. It is, one of my kids has disinhibited social engagement disorder, DSED, which is kind of similar to reactive attachment disorder in that it's an attachment disorder that's
Right.
formed during those formative years, if you will. But someone with reactive attachment disorder, it is they need. And that child did not get professional therapy and counseling services, but he certainly did need it. And that's where I come back and say foster parents also need professional therapy and counseling because when you're caring for someone with reactive attachment disorder in your home, everybody suffers. Your own children. My own kids should have got some counseling during that time as well. That was one of the times when my kids said to me, Dad, he's driving us crazy because it was just the anger was so explosive. So
Right.
explosive. But we also refused to put him on psychotropic drugs. My wife was able to help him in a natural path of action. And but it took a lot of time for us to see some sort of result.
Right.
But again, that is it is every child with reactive attachment disorder, I firmly believe needs to have ongoing, consistent professional therapy and counseling, as well as other people living in the home.
Agreed. And because I just feel like that's something rad is something that's not really talked about very much
No, that's right.
because I
I
think,
dive into some of my books and my webinars, but yeah, when I speak at events, and I'll ask how many people have had kids in their home with RAD, and I see a lot of hands go up, and I see a lot of just exhaustion cover someone's face.
right.
Because there are not many support services out there for them. That was one of the very first webinars that I tackled was that topic because I recognized not only did I need help, my fellow foster parents needed help as well with that one.
So, if you could share with the listeners what resources are available that you offer, what are some of the things that they can come and of course we'll put all of your information in the show notes so they can access those, but let us know what resources you do offer.
Well, I kind of think of the Foster Care Institute, which I'm the director and founder of. I kind of think of it as this might sound a little bit silly, but I kind of think of it as a one-stop shop for all things foster care, if you will. I
Okay.
wanted to have a place where someone could go to, whether they're considering becoming a foster parent or are currently a foster parent, a new one, a veteran, whatever it might be. I wanted to have something there for them, as well as people who in parenting in general. A lot of those webinars that we have could be for anybody who parents with children. So we have over 80 hours of online training webinars. We have videos, we have articles, we have podcasts. You name it, it's there for people who are curious about foster parenting or people who have been in the trenches for a long time and simply need some help.
That's awesome. I know that that was a resource that I went to a while ago when we were foster parents, when I was looking for what's out here, because there really isn't a lot of training. There's not a lot of resources out there at the time. Hopefully that gets expanded upon. So I'm so thankful that you do offer that. And then one last question. What is the biggest thing right now? I know you're doing a lot of legislative work and speaking and whatnot. What is the biggest thing that you're pushing for and working towards right now?
Well, I'll tell you what the legislators want to address, and rightfully so, and I must have conversations with legislators across the country every week about this. Legislators are struggling and states are struggling to recruit and retain foster parents. And those, to me, go hand in hand. Recruitment and retention go hand in hand. So I'm working with legislators on how to address those issues. You hear a lot about hoteling in the news. In fact, I was talking to West Virginia about this the other day at a judicial committee. And I was telling them the kids in the hotel, that's not the main problem. It's a symptom of a much bigger problem. They're in hotels because you don't have enough foster parents. You don't have enough foster parents because of this, and because of this, and because of this, and because of this. And your caseworkers are struggling with this, and this, and this. And then there's a myths and misconceptions associated with foster care. And then we lost a lot of good foster parents during the lockdowns. Because people, what I was hearing during the lockdowns was, Dr. John, my child from foster care is no longer in school. They can't get the support services they need in school, and they're 18 months behind academically. They're not getting professional therapy and counseling services. They're not getting in-person visitations, and their anxiety levels are through here. And foster parents are telling me, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a professional therapist or counselor. I can't do virtual visitations 5 days a week in my home. And I have my own concerns. And there's no one to help me. And my anxiety levels are through the roof. And I quit. So we lost a lot of good foster parents during that time. And then we hear a lot about mental health issues and a lot of other challenges. So there's a lot of people who are skeptical about foster parenting right now. And that's why one of my goals is to bring positive awareness, because I think awareness equals advocacy. And I think you'd agree with me when I say this. Not everybody can be a foster parent. Would you agree?
100%.
But at the same time, everybody can help in some way. Everybody can help in some way. When you have over 5 million children who experience domestic violence in their house every single day, and that was one of my things I said in COVID. I said, you can't let these kids at home. They go to school to escape child. They go to school to escape being raped. And then you're locking them in the home for 24 hours a day. But nevertheless. But everybody can help in some way. So when you have 5 million children who experience domestic violence in the house every single day in America, when you have human trafficking, the number one global business, when you have kids who are being abandoned, it means this happens in every single community. And one of my books is called The Church in Foster Care, because I believe faith-based organizations have a place to play in this as well, because the government has shown they can't do this all by itself. So if there was a church in every single community that said, hey, we're going to start our own foster care ministry, our own foster care outreach program, that's going to go a long ways to solving that problem, because you don't have to go far to find a mission field in this world.
I love that you brought that up, because I was talking to an executive director of a nonprofit foster care, and he was talking about how a lot of times the church, members of the church will step in to become foster parents, and then they say, whoa, this is way too hard. And I can understand that, because we've had people who said, I can't believe you would keep that child. He's wiping poop all over the walls. And I'm like, he's trying to survive.
Right.
But I do believe that the Bible calls us to help the orphans and the widows. But I do agree with you that might mean baking lasagna and taking it to a foster family so they don't need to stress out about what's for dinner.
Right.
Or that might mean helping out with their foster kiddo and taking their foster kiddo to buy their school supplies. Or it might mean taking their biological child to get ice cream to get a break. There's so many different ways that you can help and support.
Or a clothes closet, or a food pantry, or setting up a program where you deliver meals to the foster parents, or helping out on birthdays and Christmases. There's so many. Again, that church and foster care lists all these ways churches can get involved in helping kids in foster care without necessarily being a foster parent. You want to be a foster parent? Hey, that's great. But if you can't, here's how your church, your faith-based organization, can help children in crisis to help break that cycle. And not just the kids.
Right.
The biological parents as well, because even though they may have committed horrific crimes, they're still children of God, and God loves them just as much as he loves you and I.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode today. It's just, if you are listening to this episode and you're thinking maybe foster care is not for me, there is still a way you can help out. And I loved all of the different ideas that you have. So I just encourage you to go look at all of these amazing resources that Dr. John provides. Watch some of his trainings, tune in, support him in what he's doing, because what you are doing is changing so many lives. So thank you again for being here today and blessing our listeners by hearing your story.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey friend, I hope that you loved today's episode. I pray it blessed you and helped you see that you have a friend in your corner who truly understands what you're walking through. If so, would you share this episode with someone who's been praying for a breakthrough in their own journey? It would also bless me big time and help others to find this podcast if you would leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also submit your questions, topics that you would like covered, and find a community of like-minded mamas in my private Facebook group by searching What to Expect While Fostering and Adopting on Facebook. See you next time.